out there.
I used to know how to like check
Fair.
password.
Okay, if I can have your attention, we're in business now. May not look like it, but we are. Budgets. Budgets are our reason for being the budget committee. We must do budgets well and have them well understood. For that reason, I'm making public comment available now. Jim has some questions about his tax bill and the budgeting process itself, and I'll let him explain. Jim Hajar.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me speak. I know we've been communicating back and forth for the past week or so, but yeah, I think honestly what got me kind of looking at budgets again, and I hadn't been doing that for a while, was when I opened my tax bill, and it kind of was a surprise to me. And when I say it was a surprise, I think you all have the summary sheet, right, that I did so. That, you know, when we were at town meeting and when I voted for this budget, I was voting for a budget that I believed was going to have a tax impact of $387 on a $400,000 property, or 97 cents per thousand. And then when I got my tax bill, when you look at the total increase for the year, looking at the first, you know, the prepayment and then the December bill, my total tax bill had gone up $884. So instead of having a 3% increase, it was a 7% increase. And if you kind of roll that back to, and I kind of put in the highlights, if you roll that 7% increase back to what was proposed at town meeting to what actually happened, well, we told the residents that this new budget would result in a 3% increase to taxes. But the truth is it went up 7%. And I'm saying mine here, but we all know this is everyone in town. Everybody's the same unless you put in a new swimming pool or some huge addition, or your house is brand new and it was a reevaluation. Everybody's in the exact same boat, right? Everybody. So we all got hit with a 7% increase. And no, the voters approved the BudCom proposed increase of that $387, yet, you know, the actual increase was $656 on a $400,000 house, which is a $269 or 70% increase over the proposed. And again, if you kind of roll that into the actual impact on the tax rate, you know, the BudCom gave us the estimate that the tax impact per $1,000 would be 97 cents, and the actual impact was $1.64. Again, that's a 70% increase. So, I mean, and I have spent a lot of time going through the numbers, but I'm looking for an explanation from this board on how was that number calculated? How was that 3% number calculated, and why did it come out to be 7%? Because I feel that, you know, a tax increase is a tax increase, and the way it works in New Hampshire is awesome. This is, I mean, like, we vote on the budget here, so you got nobody to blame on a tax increase, right? We voted for it. But I do feel strongly that when we propose the budget, the really important part of that this committee provides is, well, what is that impact on our tax rates? Because to be honest with you, 100,000, 20,000, you know, these are numbers, right? Like, and it's hard to comprehend when you're talking about a $5-6 million budget. But everybody wants to know, well, how's it going to impact my pocket, right? So that number, when you're going to vote on a budget, because I'll be honest with you, like, I don't know. If I thought it was going to be 7% last year at town meeting, I probably would have not voted for it, or I would have got up and said something, I think. It just seems really high, and maybe other people would have done the same. So I think this is really important. I think what you provide is vital. We have to do this as part of town meeting and part of the process. I'm concerned that it was so far off in 2024, and I'd like to know why. And I didn't give you the data, but I know you and I talked about this. I went back and looked at 2023, and it's the same way, only in reverse. And I didn't provide you the number. I'll give it to you all if you want it, but like, it's a little more complicated because the year before there was a warrant for the amphitheater that got pulled out. So that was in your calculation. It would have been $200,000 got pulled out. We also had a budget, the voters voted a budget cut. And so, but look, I put that in there. It's not hard to do the math, and I'm good at it. So it came out like, say, it would have been $1,017, $1,014. And what actually hit was 551. So like last year, you told the people you're gonna get this big tax increase, and then it didn't happen. So again, my concern is that however the process is that you're calculating this projected, I'm concerned that it's so far off, we need to understand why and get it fixed for this year. And I'm more than happy to work with anybody. I think I know the answer, but I'd rather hear it from you guys or whatever, so.
Okay. We'll do our best to answer your questions. Actually, I'd like to interpret your questions as actually three questions. The first one being, what is the difference between our budget and our tax rate? And the second one being, what items specifically have caused our tax rate to increase from 2023 to 2024? And the third question is about the math problem.
Okay.
I'm going to read this a little bit slowly because it's important and because there are a lot of moving parts. Let's take the first question first. That is the budget versus the tax rate. They are two very different things, apples and oranges. The budget is a list of appropriations, that is, expected expenses, approved at town meeting. Nothing more is included. It does not consider revenues, credits, grants, or any other offsets to the expense. It is exclusively anticipated and estimated expenses. At the same time, it reflects our priorities and sets an upper limit on what can be spent. It is compared to the budget of the previous year. It is not compared to the tax rate. Hence, the projected 3% increase shown in Jim's note and his comments is compared to the previous year's budget. Our tax rate is an entirely different matter. It's based on actual expenditures during the year and is set to cover the cost of those expenses as the year comes to a close. Importantly, it does take into account received revenues, credits, and the total town property assessment. These offset some of the expenses. What is left to be paid must be raised by property tax, that is, our tax bill. So the budget is a list of anticipated expenses. In contrast, the tax rate is based on actual expenses, less revenues received, and other offsets. This difference is important. It's apples and oranges. Are there any questions anywhere about?
Jack, can I just ask, because I wasn't on the BudCom in the past, this is my first year. When you make these calculations, are you basing the total tax change impact as just based on the budget alone, or are you taking into consideration any revenue at all? Are you looking at last year's revenue?
Only
this is
based on the
just-
budget.
This is just, if we spent 100% of our budget last year and 100% next year, your taxes are likely to go up X. Is that how you guys have done it? Because I guess I don't know
Yes,
how you do the
yes.
math to
Yeah,
get these
we'll-
numbers.
We'll come to that.
You're gonna go to that? Okay.
Because there's a misnomer there, and
Right.
that I intend to correct.
And also,
Gotcha.
I think it's important to bring to the attention of everybody is that we have been asking for the revenue numbers year after year so that we could present it better to the community, and we're yet to receive them.
Okay. Although it depends when you're asking for them, right? And whether you want like year end. Okay. Really? Okay. That's clearly something that we could, I mean, those are readily publicly available numbers in terms of when we run the accounts receivable. So that shouldn't be, if we need to
No,
fix that
we've
for the
asked
future.
Every time that we've had this
Yep.
process, we would ask, so what are we looking at?
Okay.
And it's just
Then
not
that's something we should,
available in that.
change moving forward. Yeah, because if you want the best number, you have to have the best numbers you're putting into your formula. Okay.
One more note. I think that this discussion also included the timeliness, like the bookkeeping, the recording,
Yep.
and also it's connected with the software.
Right.
piece.
Yep.
And how do we, so it was a larger conversation that we were.
And all parts of those conversations are still moving forward now.
Yes.
Gotcha. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure that I just like Jim would love to understand exactly how that math was done because
You
I
will,
think
you will,
great,
when I get
perfect.
done.
Then I'm not going to rush you to that.
Any other comments, questions about budget versus tax rate? About apples versus oranges, can we do that, or? No, maybe not. Okay, now the second question. What items caused our tax rate to increase in 2024? Primarily, this was because the fund balance to reduce taxes was lower than it was in the prior year by nearly half. This is the amount left in the general fund from the previous year that can be used to reduce taxes in the current year. It was lower by $814,000. $814,000. That balance was the lowest since 2020. It resulted from an especially tight budget in 2023, which also, in turn, makes the 2024 increase look larger than usual.
Jack, do you want me to speak to that a little bit as a select board member in terms of how those numbers came to be that way?
Sure.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So, just like Jack said, the budget is the maximum possible amount of dollars that the select board can spend and can raise by taxes. So if we had zero revenue, zero anything, we would raise the amount that was agreed on by the voters. But of course, everybody knows that we get revenues and we get other sources. But also some years we underspend our budget. And so last fall, when we went to set the 2023 tax rate, the fund balance that we use is any unspent tax money from 2022. So 2022 was the second kind of full year of the pandemic, or even the third year if you want to argue. And in that year, we had a lot of personnel openings. We had a lot of jobs that weren't filled. We had people that left jobs. And so we had a budget that was underspent, and we had excess in the general fund from 2022. A lot of it was from personnel, so we didn't have to pay wages, FICA, retirement, Medicare for some open positions that we had. Some of those positions had been purposely cut back because of everything that was happening at COVID at that time. Some of it was increased revenues because of COVID. We got some additional grants and subsidies and federal support. And when you looked at all of it at the end of the day, in 2023, two things happened. One, that was the year that we were hearing a lot from the voters that they were looking for tax relief. And in fact, they cut our budget that year at town meeting. So the select board had received the message from the public that people were feeling financial struggles, inflation was out of control. We'd had to give our employees an elevated cost of living increase because inflation was so high. And we had gotten the message from the public that they were concerned about their tax bill. And part of that was they cut our budget that spring. So that fall, when we went to set the tax rate, we had an anomalous event, which anybody can see just by looking through the records, in that our unassigned fund balance was much higher than it usually is. So when Karen brings us the options for tax rate setting, she has a certain way that she generally does it of how much money we need in unreserved and fund balance to kind of be a safety buffer for us. DRA recommends it be between 5% of our total tax spend to up to 17%. And different towns, based on their needs, some do 5%, some do less than 5%, some do the full 17% and don't give much money back. I'll answer you in a second, Liz. Let me just finish my kind of train of thought. And so traditionally, Brentwood has held on to about $1 million of unreserved fund balance as sort of a safety buffer for us. And we had the discussion last fall that when we went to set the tax rate, we had enough extra surplus that we could give the voters a tax cut. And that was the recommendation by our town administrator and was supported by everyone on the board unanimously, to use that extra fund balance to pay down the tax rate as a one-time event last fall. And we were pretty vocal about this at town meeting, that we had been able to cut local taxes by 10%, which, like, whoever hears about their taxes going down 10%, that's not a common thing in America. And that we had done that purposely, knowing that was an anomaly because of the setting of what was happening in 2023. And so to your point, the fact that we had an anomalously large surplus allowed us to pay an unusual amount of that back to taxes. And so even though the town appropriation was $6.3 million, we only needed to go to the taxpayers for $2.8 million of that, which is why people saw a lower tax bill. And we made that decision because we thought it was in the best interest of the voters at that time when we were coming out of a very difficult tax situation. Could that situation happen again? Sure. If we ever have a time where we underspend our budget, if we have people leave, if we have turnover, if we thought we were going to buy a big truck and we don't buy it, there are absolutely other times where we could have a surplus, but that was mostly a sort of COVID unique surplus, which is why we chose to lower taxes last year. I don't know if that kind of explains it, because before I was on the board, I really didn't understand that the tax rate is sort of a moving target that is set in the fall. Even though the voters approve a budget in March, the actual amount that we're going to ask the voters for is not decided until about November of that year, right at the end of the year. Liz, did I address your question, or do you have a separate question?
I just want to make sure, because I'm not sure. I was the one that lowered the increase in the budget.
Yep.
I don't know if this was last year.
Yeah, that was that year, 23.
Okay, so we didn't, the voters didn't cut the budget. I cut the increase.
Yeah, you cut our proposed
12%
budget.
to like 8%.
Yep, correct.
So I didn't cut the budget. I cut the increase.
Yeah, that's correct, Liz. You cut the
Not the
proposed
same
budget. Correct. You cut the proposed budget. Yep, correct. So that's to explain, were taxes going to go up this year? They always were because of that anomaly. And we decided it was in the best interest to give that cut as people were trying to come out of COVID, and knowing that we would not be able to do that same cut the next year. And then that's why you see a fund balance that was more sort of typical. And if you look, that last year was very atypical for us, and we took advantage of that by giving a tax cut to the voters. And that's partly why, and if I had realized at the time that we would be in a tighter situation this year, might I have done it differently? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I was hearing from the voters, we would like you to help us out with taxes. And so that's what I was responding to. So that is really why the increase this year feels bigger because there was a significant tax cut last year. And I get that the sticker shock probably hit people when they got those bills, and
Oh,
I
and
am regretful of that, but it is
No.
what it is, because as you said.
you don't need to be
it's
regretful at all.
the-
I
It's the
get,
budget that was approved.
I think, again, back to, first of all, I believe the select board is the one who controls the fund reserve, right? It has nothing to do with this budget committee,
Correct.
does it?
Budcom has no
Right. I didn't
say
think
in
so.
that. Correct.
And so I guess I'll just save, tomorrow night I'll come to the meeting and I'll bring my chart and I'll during public participation, ask my questions about fund reserve. But for this discussion, I gotta be honest with you, like, I think I'm more curious of what you said, the formula that was used, because while tax rate is different than budget and, well, when you're determining the tax impact per 1,000, that is a estimated tax rate increase, you know? So, and I think you said, in order to do it, you are given an estimated budget. All of these budgets that are coming in are people telling you what they think they're going to spend. And usually we're really good about it. If you look at our budget appropriations versus our actual expenditures in the town, they're really good. Like, and I know, look, when I was in Methuen, I think I told Jack or somebody that the budget was $159 million when I left, when I was a counselor and I was the finance chair. It was 85 pages long. I mean, they weren't this good. So we come close. It's about estimating. So like you have the forecasted, so to me, in my opinion, it's three numbers here, right? There's the appropriation number, and then, okay, did we overspend that? And that really isn't happening here. The second number is the valuation. Sure, if you have, 100 houses put brand new swimming pools in the same year or something, or you have 15 or 20 or 30 new houses. And I don't want to get into that either, because even on new houses, you have to look at, do they have kids and this and that, but valuations could go up. But I looked at valuations. They're pretty flat in this town, 2% a year, right? So I can estimate what your valuations are going to be. So then it's revenues. And if I look at revenues in the town, they're pretty flat. Like I go back 5 years, I mean, they're flat. The biggest thing is motor vehicle permits, fees,
Yeah, it's usually
right?
about
Anyways,
$2 million.
exactly,
right?
So you know this, right? Like,
Yeah, I know.
like, granted, I've only been looking at it for 4 days, but I mean, I know it now. Yeah, so, and other than the year we had the bond, right? We had a bond for $3 million, but guess what? A bond for $3 million, it shows up as revenue, but you're also paying it out. So, so anyways, back to you, when you calculate this, I'm trying to understand. Maybe, I think you may have said it, but I just want to clarify. You said you used the previous year's revenue, so that means when you looked at the revenue line,
No,
no?
when we're talking about budget,
Yep.
we're only talking about appropriations.
Okay. Well, then, again, I'll just ask somehow if you can explain how you came up with the 97 cents per 1,000. I don't see how you can calculate that without knowing. You must have held the previous year's flat or something.
It's based on the increase from the prior year.
But
Steve?
Yeah, sure.
We're going to get to that.
Okay,
We're going to,
I'll let you keep going then. I mean,
Maybe what we should do is, can someone on this BudCom actually just walk through how the calculation is done?
well, we're going to do a lot of that.
Great, perfect.
in a
I think he's going to,
But-
preparing to answer your question.
thank you.
But what we've done so far is just explain why the general fund was $814,000 lower
Right.
in 2024. There were other factors in 2024. Inflation in New England of 3.3%. Local education increased 4%. Town appropriations increased 6%. And our county bill increased 7%. The net result of these, along with a net revenue reduction of 11%, was an increase of 9%, $1.6 million needing to be raised by taxes. At the same time, our total town assessment increased by almost 2%, which, as an offset, reduced the 9% to the 7%, the increase each property owner sees in their tax bill. The budget estimate of tax impact is actually a comparison of appropriations to the previous year. It is an estimate that assumes revenue offsets will remain the same as the previous year. As you can see from these numbers, revenue offsets can change significantly, as they did in 2024. Those changes are not known at the time the budget is prepared a year in advance. Therefore, the budget deals with appropriations only. Questions?
So Jack, I interpret that as meaning that because the select board gave that tax rebate to the taxpayers, it basically had, because you carry that forward a year, it's the reason these numbers don't add up.
Right.
Because there was the assumption that there was going to be that same revenue the next year, but it was really a one-time anomalous thing, but you guys didn't necessarily know that. And so the way you've always done it is just carrying forward prior year. So if there's an anomaly in the prior year, it potentially could carry forward an error to the next year because the money that you're assuming is flat is not necessarily there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, we want you to give that back every year.
I wish I would
But
have.
also,
I would have given it back if we had it.
I think maybe this easier way to look at it is that it literally just costs against costs. Maybe we should relabel it to a point, because it's literally just looking at your expenses this year versus your expenses the next year and comparing the two. So.
But he said
we
he's
don't-
assuming the revenue stays the same.
And
so
by
it's-
that, he assumes that the revenue is the same, but we don't look at the revenue numbers. That is not included in that. If you look at just the budget number, the total budget to the total budget, that's where that 3% came from. So you take the difference divided by the right.
So you totally ignore revenue when you do it?
Again, we
We
don't
have to.
have access to that in terms of it's not under it's not something that budget committee reviews.
Oh, okay, so that's kind of what I was asking at the beginning, is this calculation really is done totally agnostic of revenue? And therefore,
Yes.
when revenues move around a bunch by the select board, you are not privy to that, and you're gonna end up with an
Correct.
erroneous
Yes.
number.
But the difference
Okay.
in the appropriations from year to year allows us to determine what we think the change in the tax rate is going to be. But that assumption that's built into that is that revenues will be consistent.
Gotcha,
And
and they weren't.
Right, right. And many years, it's close enough. but
So
not this-
essentially, this was an unintended consequence of the select board giving the taxpayers a big tax cut last year, is that the math didn't carry forward, is the way I interpret it.
And like I said at the beginning, I knew the answer. I knew the chairman knew this too.
I didn't know this because I wasn't on the Bud Company, so I just know. the
And,
select board-
and I didn't care last year because I didn't pay, my bill was way lower than
Right.
I thought. So I wasn't here. But now that, now that I'm Mr. Expert, anyways, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that that explains why in 2023, your forecast was way too high compared to what actually happened. But again, we were all really happy about it. Thank you. Well, although I will say, I'll come tomorrow and speak more on this. I'm not sure I'm happy about it. Yeah, I was happy that my taxes last year were down, but I think long-term, that was a short-term thing. And I don't want to go into that, but I would say for this process, I would suggest that you don't know the revenues at the time you're doing this for town meeting. I get it.
Right
You
now,
don't.
Jim, we're working on budgets. For
Absolutely.
2025, a year away from now.
I-
We have no idea, and I don't know who does have an idea.
Nobody.
of what revenues will
Well,
be for next year.
What I was going to say is that I believe if you went before 2023, and I didn't do it, I didn't do the math, I could do it, but I suspect that if you go back, your estimation would have been fine because the revenues in town have been pretty flat. Like you said, it's about like 1.8, 1.9 million.
COVID made it
It's
so
flat.
tough because like if you look, like if I look at my own taxes, I've lived here almost 17 years. My taxes went up for the first 10 years that I lived here, 12 years that I lived here, and then went weirdly flattish for COVID, and now we're going up again. And I think all the COVID anomalies are kind of catching up with us a little bit and messing up our like status quo processes we used to do. And I think that is true. And I think everybody has the best of intentions to try to give
No.
the best data to the public.
Absolutely.
But I do think that our taxes have looked kind of odd over the past couple of
Well-
years, mostly because of COVID impact.
And I would just say my suggestion to fix this process, to make it maybe a little better, is honestly, unless somebody tells you there's something going to happen this year with, and again, revenues, revenues are flat. They're about the same. I mean, if you look, the revenues are going to
They
stay
go up
the
a little
same.
every year.
The valuation is going to be 2%. Unless somebody knows about something, that there's 50 new houses that are going to hit this year, then you guys should know about that because that's going to be a lot of money. And I think you should, on the budget committee, should know that and take it into consideration that there are 50 new houses this year, and that's going to bring in an additional, because it affects it, your number will be off. And my only suggestion would have been that going forward, there's only one number. It's not hard to do. I mean, it's the revenues, and they're pretty flat. And then there's the appropriations, which you already know, but then there's the fund balance. So if you should have verified, I would just say that going forward, you should verify the fund balance, that if it was really high the year before or really low, that you just ask the town administrator if there's any plans or why, because I don't know why they would ever do this, okay? But
Elena?
Could I just try a little bit? So I think
Sure.
what we're saying, and we could probably get the numbers, but during COVID, federal government gave a lot of grants. And that was unprecedented, completely unprecedented, and we could not foresee that. So what happened is that because those grants offset things like payroll in cases, right, big purchases, then the fund that, the money that resulted from appropriations from previous years, right, there's that large fund, but it was unexpected. Nobody could foresee it. It never happened before that we've got so many grants from the federal government. Now, we could probably say that it's probably not going to happen again for a while, right? So going forward, it's going to be easier to do what you're explaining. But in that particular year, no one knew. And I remember the meetings because with the town administrator where, she was saying, well, this became available, we wouldn't know if we're going to get it. And every time there were big numbers. There were $250,000 here, $250,000 there. And the town was applying for all of that, and the town received a lot of it, and it was great. And then the select board decided to give it back to the town,
ma'am.
right? But there was no way town administration or the budget committee could have foreseen that.
Again, no disrespect here. I'm in 2024, when these numbers were calculated, all I'm saying is that going forward, if the anomaly would have been accounted for, if he would have just reset and taken out I believe it's $800,000.
We didn't know.
You did, ma'am.
Jim,
The audit,
Jim,
the financial statements are closed and the audit is finished almost a year after.
yeah, I just want to.
We didn't know. That's why you get the audit report for the previous year. So come this spring, you will have an audit report for 2023.
This was
not
not
for
anything to do with
2024.
audits, ma'am. It had to do with the select board in 2023 used a lot more of the reserve fund to offset taxes. And all I'm saying is that when the chairman is doing his calculations for town meeting, just verify that that number that was in the year before is going to be probably used the next year. And honestly, if you look backwards in time, what the select board had been using from fund reserve, it's about the same every year, other than that one anomaly, which had nothing to do with
Yeah.
anything other than the
If I-
select board voted to do
Yeah,
it.
So for that, we would need access to the financial
Yeah,
statements,
we're
right?
going, we're going over the same thing over and over
Yeah.
here, and I don't want to do that. What I do want to say is, keep in mind, you have a skeleton crew operating the town office here, and I'm not just talking about now. I'm talking about
Sure.
up until now.
Yep.
So there's a lot less financial acuity here than there would have been
Well,
in Methuen, with one exception. Steve, there's a microphone here.
yeah, thanks. He asked.
Yes. I would like to just speak.
Please identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Stephen Dawson, One Lad Road in Brentwood. Excuse me. What I think is important to distinguish here is that Jim framed this to begin with to say that the Budget Committee and the Select Board at the town meeting projected that our taxes would increase 3%. That's not what the Budget Committee or the Select Board said. In your presentation, and it's in writing, very clear, you said this is a tax impact of the budget increasing 3% compared to the prior year. It is not the same as the tax rate. So to suggest that you inaccurately projected a 3% increase and it came up to be 7% is just not what happened. You did not project that our taxes would go up 7%. You simply said that if you only look at the increase in our expected expenses, the one element of the tax equation, I heard what you said. Hold on. The only thing, the statement that you made in writing at the budget presentation and at the town meeting was that in the equation of figuring out our taxes, the expense element will push our tax up 3%. You did not say that our taxes would become 3%. So it just seems like it's unfair to say that you didn't properly use a correct formula. You simply said the tax impact would be 3%. I think the problem is that that's probably the wrong language to use. It's totally understandable that people will hear tax impact and say, okay, that's what our taxes is going to be. As Jim noted, and you noted, the prior year, it actually was much lower. The second thing I would say is that in terms of Jen, in your presentation, and I'm just speaking for myself, one lesson learned, I think, from that prior year is I didn't really understand that it was such an anomalous year. If I think that had been made more clear at the last town meeting that our tax bill went down because we really had a really anomalous year and don't expect that to happen again, I think we'd be better prepared for this conversation. So,
And honestly, I'm not sure the select board really understood how anomalous it
no,
was at the
right.
time.
exactly. But the fact that we had so much of an overage from the prior year
Yep.
to offset the taxes is what made things go up
Sure.
and down. So I think to resolve the tension, maybe we need two different statements. One is just the pure expense difference and what that factor will mean in the equation of expenses and revenues. And then maybe if you want to make a projection of based on income that we know about, that we do or don't see certain unforeseen factors, then maybe you can make a projection, but I would make that very, very separate from the one thing that you do have numbers, real numbers for, which is the expense side of the equation. It's like if my wife said, how much money are we going to save this coming year? And I say in return, my income's going to go up 10%. And that's all I say. She's going to say, well, yeah, but how much are we going to save this year? Well, I don't know, because I don't know what the other way around. I know our expenses are going to go up 10%, but I don't know what my salary is going to be this year. If I can't tell you what my income is, I can't tell you how much we're going to save this year. I only know what my expenses are. So I think we're in the same situation. We can't promise what the revenues are. And I'd be very cautious about giving a number at town meeting that assumes certain income, even though I agree with Jim that normally it's about the same. All sorts of things could happen in terms on the expense side or the revenue side, and you'll be in the same situation. So if you do give a projection for the final, what our tax bill is going to be, I would put all sorts of conditions on it, because we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's fair to suggest that you didn't do a good job in saying the 3% increase.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't take it personally.
Yeah, I think your point is that the number just doesn't say how people interpreted it.
Because it's poorly
Yeah.
made.
Yeah, I hear you.
We're going to get to that.
Listen, I'll finish. I just want to say, I did not come here tonight to try to say anybody did anything wrong. I have the utmost respect for the chairman and this board. You people are all giving your time. And look, Jack, I'm good at this. You think I can help you, or Letty, any of you think I can help? And I know I feel bad because I know you're shorthanded right now. I know that the administrator's not here at this time, and this is a busy time. Let me know. I'm willing to help any of you. And like I said, I mean this. I didn't come here tonight to try to say someone did something wrong. I'm trying to say, is there a way we can do it better so that that doesn't happen again? That's all. Honestly, I have the utmost respect for you, sir. And like I said, up until 4 days ago, I wasn't even looking at it. I promise I wouldn't do this again, but.
A really big help would be if you would tell me what our revenues are going to be next year.
Well, I can tell you what the revenues will be in town.
Good.
Want to know?
Wait a minute,
You might not know
Want to know?
what
So-
our expenses are going to be, though.
But I won't know how they're going to use the fund reserve until I talk to them tomorrow night. But I'll get back to you on
Well,
that.
and even we won't know that until a year from now.
Well, you will vote it, though.
We won't vote on next year's tax rate till next fall.
No.
So it's,
Anyways.
I think maybe the bigger question is, should the BudCom be tasked with estimating tax rates anyways? Is that really a fair thing to ask a group to do? Because what the public is voting on is the budget.
Right.
And they know that budget will impact their taxes, and there's so many moving parts. I think you could probably have a philosophical conversation of, is it even a fair ask? Because it's basically unpredictable. I mean, you could ballpark it. Maybe we should give a
No.
plus or minus 5%. I mean, that's sort of the bigger question that
ma'am.
can be had if people want to.
It's more of just looking at the
But
previous year.
imperfect
Because
science.
if you look back 1 year, you have actuals,
Yeah.
and you say, were there any anomalies?
But we don't know what anomalies might happen next year that might impact.
No.
this.
None of us can do that. I know that. No. But what I'm
Maybe
saying
it's
is
not even
this
fair to
time,
try
if
to
we
project it.
knew about the anomaly, and if we would have said, oh, that's not going to happen, I know he would have taken it out, and he would have hit the 7% almost exact.
Yep,
So, and again, this isn't
it
intended.
is what it is.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jim.
So there is a form that is filled out for estimated revenues.
The MS.
So the MS 434. So although it's not going to be exact, we do have access to an estimated amount of revenue, or will have by the end of this year, if that gets filled out
Well,
properly.
but the 434 is
but-
not available until late in the year.
No, we got it in October last year.
I think the issue, Michelle, is that that won't account for the fund balance issues, right? I think that's just true estimated revenues from the right?
But that's more
Monies.
than we've been talking about so far.
Sure, if you didn't even have that information, that's a starting point. That would have given you that $2-ish million revenue, right? Yeah, it wouldn't have accounted for the other
But-
fund balance issues.
But when is it published?
Well, we got it in October last year.
Okay, so that was That was October for,
There's two versions. There's the original version, which happens early in the year, and then there's a revised one that happens closer to tax setting.
so the 737 comes first, and then comes the 434.
But Letty, that will not account for any general fund issues, right? But it, so that's the number that we already can pretty much predict, because it was 1.9 million, now it's 2.1 million, next year it'll probably be 2.3 million, like, we know exactly kind of what that trend is.
Yes, I mean, the only thing that I would say to that is that we have our budgeted expenditures report, which kind of
Right.
shows us what we're on track to
Yep.
have left over, if
Yep.
that's something that would be helpful.
Yeah, we could
Well-
certainly try to estimate, based on the things the select board knows, what we think the fund balance might look like, but it's, you know, it's a little bit of a guessing game.
But when you get it in October, it's for that year. It's for the following, like we're in October now. Oh, no, we're in November now, but
Yeah, we have to anticipate, it's estimated revenues,
it's estimated a year ahead.
yes.
Not for 2024, though, it was estimated for 23.
Yeah, that's what,
But you would be working on one now.
No, what I'm saying is
But-
that right
but
now,
we-
we are looking at 25, right,
Yes.
budget-wise? That's what I'm saying. So if we're looking at 25 budget, then the forecast of 25 is not there. So the tax rate next year is going to be set against the revenues that are going to be projected for
Right,
that
and that
year.
number
So
you don't know till next
23,
fall.
the revenue of 23 was used to project and set the tax rate for at the end of 23.
Mm-hmm.
Now our tax rate was set based on a projection of this year of 24. So we don't know the 2025 projection of the revenues. That's what is.
Correct.
So if we're looking at the budget of 25, it would be great to know what that projection for 25 is, right? But in any case, since the budget committee is tasked to look at expense side of things and approve
Yep.
that side, then perhaps that kind of analysis should come from the Board of Selectmen.
but we would like to know whatever anybody else in the town knows about the revenues for the year.
Sure.
That would be helpful for us to know.
Yeah, if you're going to try to do the best possible guess.
But we may or may not use it,
Yep,
but
we
we
could
want
certainly,
to know where we are.
yeah, we could certainly try to do that when we go to set these numbers for next year, but knowing that it will be wrong, right? But we can give our best guesstimate.
So Liz Faria South Road, I'd like to go to now, not backwards. So one of the things you're asking people to consider is a $273,000 additional at the fire department. And you're saying that the fire department needs a deputy chief and 2 lieutenants. Those are both big numbers. And I would like you to consider a deputy chief or 2 lieutenants. So that, because we know that's going to be a huge increase. So my suggestion, both for the budget committee and for the select board, is that you pick one, or the chief picks one or the other, which is more important right now, the deputy chief or the 2 lieutenants.
Yep, that's on the
Because-
agenda for tonight.
Okay,
And
well,
for
I'm
tomorrow
just
night for
throwing
us.
it out there because this is public comment.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to compliment Daphne for the new voting machine, because instead of spending the 10,000 ARPA she requested, she's only spending 4,000. Well done. And I would like to also say that the 6,000 left over should go to the Historical Society, who doesn't have a budget. And the one other complaint I've had for about 3 or 4 years is that we need new windows at the rec center. I don't know why this is taking 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, whatever it is, but it's at least 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of ridiculous. So that should be somewhere soon. Thank you.
Maybe she wants to do
Thank you, Liz. Okay, one last thing. The budget process has historically used the phrase tax impact, and we inherited it. This is a misnomer, and it is misleading. I addressed that in February at the budget public hearing, as Steve mentioned, saying, quote, "Tax impact is not the same as the tax rate," end quote. on 5 different slides to make the point. This February, I plan to change the words tax impact to something like budget impact.
That makes sense. Yeah, leaving the word tax out of it would probably be helpful. Gabby wants to say something.
I do think when we get there, the question that people are going to ask, no matter if we call it budget impact or tax impact, is how will this affect my household budget, which is what will my taxes be? And so whether we change, I think changing the label is a great first step in moving towards clarity and I don't know the other C word I'm looking for, but I do think that we will, and what we had tried to do last year is continue to move towards how do we present the information so everybody has all of it, and it's transparent enough for you to be able to do the calculation, Jim, like you were asking, so that way everybody can redo that if they need to.
And just to continue to educate people that you can't answer that question for them. And it would take 8 more months of the year before that number is even known.
And the way it's set up,
Right.
These are the numbers we have, and this is the calculation that we have, and this is what it spits out. And we're providing it for you to make an educated decision and vote. But I do think, like, instead of saying we can't estimate it, people are going to ask the question anyways.
Sure.
And I think that we should be prepared to do our best to try to answer that when it's time.
Okay, and yes, there is another reason to make the change to budget impact. Question number 3, the math problem.
Maybe.
It's a bigger problem than I thought. I can't see it over there. Oh, okay.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I just want the top one, yeah, okay. If we have a budget appropriation of $24 million, and we have net revenues of $6 million, that means we'll have a tax effort of $18 million. 24 minus 6 is 18. If we then say, for the year that we're projecting, that we want to, or we need to have a 3% increase, that would be an increase of $720,000. If we presume that the net revenue stays the same at $6 million, that would be a $720,000 increase to the $18 million we had before. And that $720,000 on $18 million is 4%. So what looks like a 3% increase in the budget actually becomes a 4% increase in the tax, although the dollar increase is exactly the same. It says, however, there. Let's go down to the next box. If we put that 3% increase in place with our budget appropriations, that brings the budget to $24,720,000. If we say now our revenues might decrease by 10%, that means our net revenues would be $5,400,000, which means we would need to raise $19,320,000. That's $1,320,000 more than the 18 million we had the previous year. So that is a 7% increase in our taxes. So what that means is with a 3% increase in the budget and a 10% reduction in revenues, the increase in taxes becomes 7%. This is very close to what happened to us and our tax bills in 2024. Questions about the math problem?
And just for clarification for, I think, everybody, when you say revenue decreased, I know the state counts fund reserve to offset taxes as revenue. You're considering that as revenue, right? In this number here? You must be.
The revenue would be the amount that's allowed to reduce taxes.
Okay. Yeah, and again, because but like in my home or all of us with our lives, we have income that we make by working, right? But you might have savings in the bank. So all I'm saying is like that number where you say when you say the revenues went down in the town and they did, if according to the state, no doubt. But it's because of the fund, because the year before they took a big you know the number.
Well, that's what we discussed that.
Correct.
earlier.
So I want to make sure that's what you mean by that line, right? Where it says revenue was less in 2024. It's the fund reserve.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure because
It's the reduction in the amount that's allowable for the reduction to reduce taxes.
right. The
And the
amount.
select board determines that.
Yes, sir.
But they're really, in a way, their hands are tied because it depends upon the amount that is available at that point in time.
Sure. It's a savings account that every year usually they're really good. Usually we have some excess and it goes into the fund reserve and they can, if they want, use it to offset taxes. And that's all I'm just making sure that everyone in the room and whoever's watching this understands that the revenue didn't go down in Brentwood last year. It was the select board decided to put less money from the fund reserve toward taxes in 2024 than they did in 2023.
No, that would imply that they have the same amount of money to work with, and they don't.
Oh, no, I
They
wasn't
have
implying
X
it.
amount of money, and they have to allocate a portion of that to pay the bills for the rest of the year. And then what's left is what they can allocate to reduction of taxes
Okay.
in the year.
All I was saying is that in 2023, they used more of the fund reserve to offset taxes than they did in 2024.
Correct.
And that difference, which you've said is $800-something thousand, that's why the revenue went down.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So the point is a 3% increase in budget and a 10% reduction in revenues, the increase in taxes becomes 7%. Again, this is very close to what we've experienced. Any other questions?
I think if we're changing the labels, we should probably change the label revenue and say total funding. Offsets, yeah, or whatever it is.
Okay.
right? Because some of those come from government, some of those come from, they're different ways. I think what was meant by revenues was like the collection of taxes and, which is different. That part is
No,
about 2 million of that.
No, the I consider the collection from taxes not revenues. It's taxes. The revenues,
Well, the way that it's reported anyway.
yeah.
The way that it's reported, and then everything that offsets the tax, everything that offsets that is funding, right?
We can refine the terminology. I mean, we
I'm just thinking that
definitely
that's where
should
it
do that.
becomes different, because when people think of revenue, they think of,
People paying bills.
right, or
Yeah.
like revenue that like you buy something from the store has a revenue, right? Like, so that's different, because if we were to look at everything that was collected for fees, right,
Yeah.
in the town, that's not 6 million or 5
Yeah,
million.
it's revenue slash
Right, because.
tax
It's
pay
re-
down.
it's-
And
it-
also,
however-
that
whatever
would
you wanna call
include would that include ARPA and everything? Like, wouldn't that kind of include the funding
No,
that
because
comes from
ARPA's
the-
outside of the budget.
Okay, so what about
Only
the
if you
funding
used
that
ARPA,
comes-
if you used ARPA to directly pay down taxes, yes, that would impact it. But that would be part of like a tax pay down, just like from the,
Right, but all those tax pay downs are in that number.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
yeah, you
since
could
it's
do
not
revenue slash tax pay down slash, whatever,
Yeah.
however you want to think about it.
The state contributes
that's what
funds
I'm
for
saying, so it's
education or
also-
whatever.
Right.
That-
Yeah,
that
there's a
would be
bunch of different
counted in
things
the
that go
revenue.
into that number.
Allowance or, yeah. offsets,
Offsets, yeah, offsets is a
I
good
like that.
number. Yep. I think we should probably move on. I think everybody understands
Just one very quick-
why this occurred.
Yeah, in a minute.
Just one quick.
Sure, I talk to the chair. It's the chair's decision, not me.
Mr. Chair, I think you have a second, even larger math problem ahead of you, which is if the desire for all of us is to have some prediction for what our taxes will be next year, what our tax rate will be next year, following year, when we go into revaluation,
Mhm.
it's going to be nearly impossible, it seems to me, to figure out the math to be able to project what our tax rate will be, because we'll have an entirely different tax base, and we'll have as a town and individually, we'll have a different value to be taxed upon.
Yep.
So I would, again, keep our expectations really low, that you can enter at least the next town meeting or the one after, to be able to say, we have a projection of what your taxes will be the following year. Because when the value, we have the benefit of the last 5 years to be able to see, relative apples to apples, because we've had the same tax base. But when we hit that next bump, the numbers are going to be all completely different. So I wouldn't want to give townspeople the expectation that you're going to be able to provide any sort of accurate projection for what our tax rate's going to be, given how everything's going to be changed by the revaluation.
Okay, thank you. Finally, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, the presentation you made, and I think Steve also made last year, is worth going back to, because he specifically showed what happens when there is a revaluation. And even though the base gets bigger, your tax rate gets smaller, and it all kinds of evens out, nothing really super big changes, but the rates look different. And I think that's what he's speaking to, Jim, is that it's going to be hard to
Yeah, you can't.
Okay.
manipulate.
The tax isn't going to change. Most people will not even see a tax change.
Right, but the rate,
People who have the brand new houses.
but the rate will change.
People who have older houses that get valuated up, they're going to pay more.
But it's estimating the tax rate. And I think that's where the presentation that Steve and Jack made last year is really helpful to go back to.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut off the conversation here. We've all had a good chance to speak. So finally, it's worth noting that although inflation has increased 21% since 2020, our tax rate has increased less than 9% during the same time period. Now, and this is finally the final, I will post this on the website, and I've submitted it to the Brentwood newsletter. If you want a copy now, send me an email along with any questions to jmitchell@thebrentwoodnh.gov. That address is also on the town website. Thank you all for your patience. I apologize to town employees that have been here for an extended period of time. This took much longer than I thought it was going to. But taxes are important and a major concern here. So let's move on to minutes. The first minutes up are October 28th. Any suggestions or? I'm okay with those minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
And I abstain.
Got the abstention. Next minutes, November 11th. I like those minutes too. Is there a motion?
Make a motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
And I'm an aye. Next up, Jen, you have anything from the select board that we should know about?
No, I think the big discussion is that, as Liz mentioned, there's been discussion over the past few weeks about some changes that we probably need to think about for our fire department. And the way we had left things is talking about some of the top priorities for the town, which would be a good succession plan for our chief for when he decides to retire. And as sort of our first priority, next priority as how to help attract and retain firefighters who want to stay in Brentwood. And then an additional priority of looking at base pay for our firefighters and determining if it is fair and equitable for the region and helping to attract firefighters to our department. And so the Chief Byrd and his staff have come to talk to the select board about it. We talked about it last week and decided that rather making any decisions last week, that because there are some big sort of philosophical and structural changes for that department, and because the actual budget for fire is not coming to us until this week, we decided to hold any official discussions last week at the select board and then come here, because the select board really values being on the same page as the BudCom, and I think Chief values that as well, in terms of knowing that these are going to be some big changes that do have price tags associated with them. And so before moving forward with the select board consenting to any of these changes, although I will say that I think the select board has been most vocal about the necessity of a succession plan, that we wanted to bring the general discussion to this board first to take the temperature of this board in terms of, do they share some of those priorities, and would they be in support of seeing some of these changes happen in the next year's budget, with the understanding that they do have a price tag with them. And so we kind of left it that way at our meeting last week to say, let's kind of table the discussion, let's bring it to BudCom, let's try to get select board, BudCom, and fire in the same arena of agreement about how we're going to move forward with this before we approve an actual budget tomorrow, and then that budget comes to you guys next. So it was really trying to have a collaborative process with the understanding that these are some bigger changes that are being suggested. And I'll just reiterate that the select board has been the most vocal about the creation of a deputy chief, because of the understanding that our chief is at some point, probably in the relatively near future, going to want to go into a happy retirement, and that we need a good plan in place for that. So that is sort of where I will leave it. And I think Letty was going to talk about some of the specifics. I don't know if the chief wanted to, or just sort of have the select board present it. But tonight was really sort of to have like a shared discussion and make sure figure out what our agreement points are between the fire department, the select board, and this board, because we want it to go as smoothly as possible as we talk about this budget that might be changing.
So does Letty have a spreadsheet to present, or how do you want to go further with this discussion?
I think some of it, I think, might be worth talking about even without the numbers, in terms of, would this BudCom be in general assent that we need to create a deputy position, et cetera, you know, and knowing that that is going to impact the budget, right? And that's unavoidable, and we can talk about the numbers, obviously. But I think some of it is more of taking the temperature of all the voting members on this board, in terms of what Liz Faria said, in terms of, does this board want to try to do everything in next year's budget? Do we want to try to prioritize? I think that maybe taking the temperature of some of the BudCom members, just in terms of their gut feeling about how they want to see this process go. And then Letty can obviously present some specific numbers that fire has looked at. But I think the numbers are almost less important if there's not a philosophical agreement for how we have to move forward with this department. And obviously the select board and fire feel that making some changes in the immediate budget in front of us next 2 weeks is a necessity, but we obviously want our budgets to match BudCom budgets as much as possible. Ooh, thank you. So we can do that however you want, but that's just sort of my thought.
I think the only thing I would add to that general, this is what we should talk about concept, is that kind of like you did with PD over the last few
Right.
years, like here's where we are now and here's where we would like to get to.
Right.
On that note, the fire department is heavily understaffed. And so we've kind of charted out, this is where we are, this is where we want to be. And I think to your point, how do we want to get?
Right. I think you
Yeah.
were talking sort of like a 5-year
Or 3
growth, whatever, a multi-year, knowing that you can't do all changes all at once, you know, on the taxpayer's dime, that it has to be a smart, thought-out process and setting priorities. So maybe having sort of a general conversation about what priorities this BudCom is in agreement with, and or talking to the chief about, you know, their priorities for the department might be helpful.
Chief, did you want to make a statement about on a microphone, just to say where your department is and where you want it to go?
To give you a little background, I am supposed to have at this point 4 full-time firefighters, with a day shift that's covered by per diems, and the night shift is basically still covered by the call people with a stipend basis. The process that we're having at the moment and going down the line, I am at the age that I'm thinking about giving this up. I think the succession plan is probably a good idea, knowing what we've been through with a couple of different boards, that if we can get somebody lined up that has an idea of how the town works, how the budget works for a town, and it would take some of the burden off of me as to the operations on the floor type of thing. I've got a lot of administrative work that I'm doing, a lot of different things that I'm running around and doing. And if you put a deputy in place, there would be actually somebody to supervise the floor, was the idea behind that. With the idea of the 2 lieutenants, we were looking in the projected future. There again, a stabilization in the workforce. If you take a look at the firefighters that have been through the department, the longest one I've been on the department now, that's one of my full-time employees, has been here 3 and is maybe considering making a change in the spring. Not due to the town, but his own doing. The idea was to get a couple of lieutenants in here that had a little more experience on the job to help stabilize that and help stabilize the per diem side of it. My projection down further for probably the following year would be to put a 3rd per diem on, or another per diem on a shift along with that, to give you 3 people. As it stands right now, the way things are working, if I have a per diem bang out tomorrow morning or even tonight, the chance of filling that is about slim and none. So Katarina, myself, and a couple of the people are trying to pick up that slack. I think it behooves the town to at least have 2 people on the shift that you can count on. This deputy would help in in some respects, because he would be around 4 or 5 days a week during the day type of thing. The idea next year, like I said, would be to eliminate the stipend part of it and try to get somebody in the station so there's 2 people on a full-time basis. So that would probably be with the full-time person and the per diem. And that's where I'm projected out for at least next year. So, any questions?
Chief, do you want to make a comment? The other moving part, I believe, was wage adjustments. Where do you put that in sort of your
The wage
prioritization?
adjustment I would definitely like to get. We play this game, and I'm not picking on anybody, but we seem to do this. Every time I walk in here with a wage adjustment, I'm already 2 steps back from everybody else, because I'm using union contracts for the area, and no matter how many times you do that, somebody is already in the process of negotiating a new union contract. So the idea behind this is to at least get everybody level at this point. So I would really like to see that as a priority, is to at least get the pay scale, which was the original budget that I had given Jack, and at least have that part a given, and then we can discuss the others. But that was the idea behind it. It is, like I said, a rolling thing. I know Letty's done some research into contracts and knows exactly where I'm coming from. And it's nice to say, okay, then that's why they do them. They project out 3 years, and you're getting an automatic 3% COLA, and you're getting an automatic step raise for this, that, or the other thing. We haven't worked out all the details for this. The town is in a growing stage here. And as you move forward with this, it gets more and more complicated. The fire department is kind of a different workforce. For the way my rotations work at the moment is a day on, 2 days off, a day on, 4 days off. But at the end of the year, when you turn around and you add up those guys' hours, they're actually working more than the regular town employees, even though they've got that spacing in between.
So, as I understand it, you have 4 full-time positions
Supposed to have.
available now.
Right.
Are they all filled?
I've got 2 filled at the moment.
Only 2 out of 4.
2 out of the 4. And it's an ongoing, and I'll be honest with you, it's an ongoing process through every town. Everybody's doing the same thing, even the bigger ones. And I've told the group before, they're not interviewing, you're not interviewing them, they're interviewing you as to whether it's a fit.
Would you, and you want to move towards adding a deputy position and elevating 2 of the full-time positions to lieutenant?
The 2 open spots would be the 2 spots that I would be trying to fill. I should take that back, depending on what Trevor's interest is. And if he was looking to do a projected thing, then it might came from an house. But other than that, they would be 2 outside positions.
Do you think this would stabilize your workforce if you were able to?
I can't guarantee anything. I know I've got a couple of people that I've talked to that would have an interest in those 2 lieutenants' positions. One of them has been with the department in the past and would be interested in coming back. He's got a full-time position somewhere else at the moment, depending on how the salary lined up and so forth. You also got to understand with these guys, they've got buyouts and different things that are in their contracts that they've got to justify. But the idea is to get somebody that's been running in Exeter, who runs their butts off all day long. They're shorthanded over there, and literally runs all day to come to a smaller department. They've earned their best 5 years, because the way it's based for most guys right now. So your best 5 years are in, you're gonna come to a smaller town, go a slower pace, and maybe do another 5, 6 years, depending on where they stand on their retirement.
Chief, I have a question that just more of a, can you remind, because that's gonna come up and people obviously look at the numbers, right? Could you please remind, because I remember some of the stories and I still get kind of horrified, but what does it mean to a town the size of ours, right? If we are understaffed the way that you understaffed, you know, what does it mean in terms of your timing of getting to, you know, help where needed?
As it's,
Especially at night and especially with Exeter now, pulling
with
some of the
ALS
help out, right?
disappearing, we are still working on that process. I have had discussions with the board. We are looking possibly, if it goes the way I can see the chiefs in the area going, that we would house an ALS unit in our station, which means you literally get 2 paramedics 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if they're in the station. And then they're on another call. So there is some benefit to that we don't have. I do have some paramedics on shifts right now, but Alyssa, my captain, is probably the most available one I have, and she works a day shift for me type of thing. So we are covered somewhat during the days. After 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it becomes a who's up and who's willing type of thing. To be honest with you, I was in town here last night at 11 o'clock doing a smoke investigation, trying to find a smoke, and I had literally 2 guys from my department. The one I'm talking about that I would like to slide into a lieutenant spot, and the guy that was on duty. I was back again at 5 o'clock this morning for that same smoke, which we did finally find that, thank God it was an Exeter and it wasn't my problem, but this is what we run at night. What I do right now is that the idea behind the full-time person was to get somebody to your house that could make judgments and decisions until whether a second member from my department or a mutual aid ambulance is needed or a mutual aid engine is needed, that they could at least make some decisions up front. That right now, without the 2, has become a little more difficult. I do have open shifts. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. Be glad to show them the schedule. We all operate on a shoestring. The area operates on a shoestring. The only one that really, well, the only towns that are doing better are the ones that have the full-time 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week coverage. So,
Is our ambulance service affected by the numbers that we're talking about here, the positions? Or are they, is that a different group of people that are?
no, the ambulances would all be part of that. These guys would be cross-trained to do both the fire and the EMS side of it. Right now, as a matter of fact, I'm probably doing a little better on the EMS side because I do have people like Katerina that doesn't have to be certified on the fire side. So God forbid you have a fire that night, depending on who's on and who's coming. We're getting to the point that volunteers are great. Call people. Can't call them volunteers anymore, you're paying them. Call people are great, but the demands of homes, their home life, and so forth and so on, is making it very difficult to fill those slots. I have got 4 or 5 dedicated people, but even that group is getting tired and going, I'd like to spend a little more time with my family. So this is the direction you're headed. And I'm not the only town that's this way. You can talk to any of the area chiefs. It's the same thing with these smaller towns.
Okay, thank you. We're not going, I don't see us voting on anything tonight. This is informational presentation. I personally would like to see us have a fully functional fire department and ambulance service. Anybody else can speak to that also.
Yeah, I think that those kind of services are essential, and if everybody thinks about their loved ones and, you know, in that need, the moment that we need that help, and if it doesn't come, what it might mean, and not to have, what I call critical resources available to town. I don't know how many people realize that, you watch all these movies and ER and whatever, and 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and help is there. And when we spoke last time on this subject, and when we were told that it could take up to 40 minutes at night, that 40 minutes, somebody might be gone. And there's not, with Exeter Hospital going through changes and difficulties that they're experiencing, there's not even a close-by solution to bring someone, you have to drive to Manchester at that point, which is, again, depending on the situation and, everybody's circumstances, that might not be an option. And then furthermore, looking at the rates that these people are being paid to literally run into the fire and save us, we're competing with Burger King at this point.
Any other comments from the committee?
I would like to say one thing, that it is a strong mutual aid system here. Even though we string it together, it is a strong mutual aid system here. You can't function without the other towns to begin with. And we have developed a real good rapport with the two towns surrounding us on either side. Exeter is, like I said, got to deal with their own problems, but they were out there today with me, running around the woods trying to figure out exactly where this was. They're a great group over there. They'll be willing to help you, but that help may not be there. ALS was covering a big hole from about 7 o'clock at night till about 6 o'clock the next morning. Most of the area departments, whether it's on my station or up the street, may have a paramedic available. At night, you're relying very heavy on those people. They have got skills that they've gone to school a long time for, that they've worked hard for. One of the plans that we're working with and looking at is taking that part of it, excuse me, out of the fire service end of it. They would be in a Group 2 retirement system, and it's been modeled after a department down the road here. He's had very good success with it. So he's got his fire team, he's got his paramedic team, and it has worked out. Most of the people that have done 18 months to 2 years of training in the EMS side of it do not want to be firefighters. Same as firefighters, 90% of them do not want to be paramedics. They'll do the advanced part of it, they'll do the EMT part of it, but to be a paramedic, it's a separate skill that they've really worked hard to be at. A lot of them go on to be PAs and nurses from that, because they get the hunger for it and they enjoy dealing with patients and taking care of patients. And some of the best help that I've seen comes out of that Exeter Hospital, and those people should be thanked. They will be here through March 21st or 24th, I think it is. And then Exeter is pulling the plug on that program. They have been dedicated. They've been hired and fired about 4 different times already, and they've only lost 1 paramedic out of that program that has been working over there. They're dedicated to the area. They're a great group of people, a lot of fun to be around, and we have a good working relationship. So I want to give them credit for what they do, and the reason that we're looking at maybe splitting that up and making it a separate entity. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments from the committee, thank you, Chief. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought.
It might be helpful, Letty,
I didn't know that was going to be available.
if we're asking the BudCom to give kind of general prioritization and assent so that the select board can use that tomorrow when we actually vote on this budget. it might be helpful to give like sort of ballpark numbers for
Yep.
all the different parts of the suggestions that the chief is making.
And I can do my best, just plug some numbers into a spreadsheet. So I have an 8-year plan for staffing up. The first year is the worst, based on the plan that I have just made up. To be clear, this isn't real, I just made this up. So having 1 deputy, 1 lieutenant, and 4 firefighter slots, while also including a small wage adjustment, would be $275,000 over last year's budget. Now, I know that that's a little high because I priced the firefighter and EMT slots at the highest possible, but I don't know what your actual people, you would know better than I would, what your actual people, what their levels are. And then I just added more people, 1 more person every year.
And so Lady, that number that you were quoting was adding a deputy, adding 1 lieutenant, did you say?
1 spot for a lieutenant.
And then
I
keeping-
didn't quite understand so I guess I could change it to 2 and 3, if that's what the chief would prefer.
I think wasn't your initial thought to turn 2 of your
The
true
thought was
open
to turn
positions?
was to turn it into 2 at this time. Like I said, to stabilize, let me turn this back on, to stabilize the group where you're gonna get people coming through the door, this becomes a stepping stone, and it probably will remain that way to a certain point. You're gonna get the basic EMT with the firefighter 1, firefighter 2 to come through the door. He's gonna grab 6 months or a year here, and the way things are right now, and as small a group as this is, there's 250 fire departments in the state of New Hampshire. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows where to grab if they're really looking for somebody. I mean, we've gotten better about it, but they literally stand there at CPAT, which is the physical agility course that they run, and they're handing out applications. You passed, come see us, type of thing. So that's how bad it is in the state to begin with. Like I said, the reason for the 2 lieutenants is I thought it would settle it out a little bit and give me 2 people that were strong in here and hopefully stay a while. And then my thought, Letty wants to put another full-time person on. I thought maybe another per diem and spread it out a little bit, then you're not paying a benefits package type of thing.
I
So
think
that's the direction I was headed.
I think if we want to have a fully staffed fire department, we have to be a little more moving forward than tiny baby steps. Because by the time we get there, moving from per diems to full-time people, it's gonna be behind again.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at numbers, and that's what we're all sitting here trying to decide what numbers are. I'm trying to lessen the impact as much as possible. The town has been great for what they've done so far. You're looking at a fire truck in this mix. You're looking at a couple of different things. The grant I was working on is not gonna pan out. You're looking at replacing a fire truck here shortly. You're looking at a $500,000 to $600,000 vehicle just for an engine at this point, if not a little more. The ladder trucks I priced out were at 1.5 to 1. Almost 2 with a ladder truck is. So you gotta take that into consideration, and I'm trying to look at it as a long-term projected thing, and that's the reason I'm being a little more conservative.
I think the other thing that you just have to keep in mind, Chief, is that as the select board is looking at our budgets, we can decide that we're gonna focus on fire this year and maybe be a little more conservative in other places so that there isn't a huge increase.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. That's up to you guys. I am just trying to present what I think is the best budget at the time. But I am looking for 2, and I can
So-
do it for the, if you take there was a correction
Yep.
on.
So to clarify, the budget that you're going to present to us tomorrow
Is-
has 2 of your full-time workers turning into 2 lieutenants.
That would be my.
So 2 lieutenants, 2
lieutenants and a-
full-timers,
And the deputy.
and then a deputy. So you're adding a body, you're turning 2 existing positions into an upgraded lieutenant position.
Right.
That's the budget that's going to be in front of us. So that's what the BudCom should really be thinking about if they would be in support of. And that's in the realm of 275 to 290, $290,000, which is, which would
those.
be, but that includes all of your budget increases, right? That's not
That-
just your personnel.
right.
That's
That's-
his entire budget.
That's
He's
my
gonna present
entire
to us
budget
tomorrow.
increase.
So it's going up from a budget around just over $1 million to more like $1.3 million. So it's a big change. And so I think what would be the most helpful for the select board tomorrow is this board in support of all of that, some of it, what's the vibe that everybody's feeling, and knowing that we have to then, make sure we explain effectively to the public why we need to make these changes, no matter what we approve. So that's what we're kind of looking for, and it's why we're bringing it here first before voting on it tomorrow.
Can I ask a quick question? You just mentioned I don't know if you call them promotions or you're just actually changing the positions, but it's a difference in that salary range, not a full add. Do all the other positions also include the salary increases that you had put together?
The original
based on-
budget that I handed you people included a pay raise for everybody across the board.
Okay, and that's this.
And that would be in this budget with adding the 3 people.
Okay,
So this $290,000 increase also includes
Includes
the
the
base pay.
base,
Correct. So
in-
this includes everything,
includes
sounds
everything.
like. Okay.
and it sounded like what you were saying before is your priorities are definitely salary increases and the lieutenants if possible, and that those sound like, one, ensuring that we can keep the staff that we
I
have.
think, I don't, to step on that a little bit.
Sure.
I go back and forth with the 2 lieutenants.
Okay.
If you want to keep from having a transitional problem or projected transitional problem, then the deputy is the direction to go.
Well, I think
If you're gonna make it down the line, my priority would be the pay increase for everybody, the deputy, and the 2 lieutenants.
okay. What I guess I was trying to get at is what the goals are for each of those pieces. It sounds like the goals for the salary increases are really to keep and also try to fill open positions. The deputy and the lieutenants are to move forward with a stabilizing and a what's the word? Secession plan, brain. And so all of this, to me, especially the proposed and the positions, feels like not just an overarching plan for the department, but also safety concerns and overall for our town and what feels like necessary resources that we don't currently have.
Yeah, the idea behind it is, like I said, to get some stabilization in the station. The per diems that I have right now work for at least one other department, if not 2. I've got some guys that have come back to this department, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but have come back because I'm still running the show. And they started out here and they feel a need to contribute back to something that they're doing. The idea behind getting the full-time people and the stabilized full-time people is you got people that are familiar with your town, familiar with the needs of the town, and familiar with locations and so forth of things in town. When you do it with a per diem, he shows up today, does his thing for the day, and then he's gone.
Okay.
That's the idea behind it. We're not filling, excuse me, we're not filling the full-time positions right now with the people you want to keep because they're not staying.
Right.
The last gentleman that just left and took a position over in Rye had been here just about 6 months, little, almost a year. So this is the kind of transition you've got going on, which makes it very hard for the group itself. The deputy would help in stabilizing the training part of that end of it, because you've got to be familiar with every piece of equipment, and he would be doing that. But you're asking somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning who's probably basically, and I'm being totally honest with you, out of a firefighter 2 class in the last year and a half, out of an EMT class probably in the last year, and you're asking them to control the situation in this town at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they're gonna go. And it's not their fault, that's what you're asking. I've got some people that were very good at that, and I've got some people that are in that realm. So that was the idea behind trying to do the two.
I get, just to close my point, I want to point out the nuance of there's always an effort to control budgets, to be fiscally responsible for the town and the taxpayers. There's also a requirement or necessity to understand resources that the town may need that create safety, security, that help bring knowledgeable and staff and people to our town, and to continue to provide resources to our town to, attract new people and keep our property assessments high.
The other thing, let me explain the lieutenants maybe a little better.
Wait, just one sec,
Sure,
one
I'm
moment.
sorry.
So I just wanted to point out to Letty's point that here it seems like it's more of a safety and long-term planning. In maybe we look at what else could be conservative this year to help with that, and not just cutting positions that, because of the big number. So I think to move away from the sticker shock, to just point that out.
I appreciate the support. What you're probably gonna get, or what I'm looking for in a lieutenant's position, is somebody that's got 5, 6 years of experience on the job, has done it somewhere else, has a feel for what's going on, versus the young kid that's coming out of the school that hasn't got that experience, that the full-time lieutenant can mentor and take them under their wing and point them in the right direction type of thing. That's the reason behind that, along with the deputy. And the deputy is more for my transition, as I really don't know how much longer. I still enjoy the job. It's just this end of it, I'm not real happy with. I'll be perfectly honest.
I can't imagine why you would not enjoy.
Oh, I
meeting
love you
with
guys'
these
company,
fine
don't get me
people.
wrong,
What?
but it's taxing.
Okay, to
And
let you off the hook, I'm gonna take one more comment from Katerina, and that's it.
If you come up to the microphone, you'll get recorded.
Yeah.
Or you can use that one. She can use that one.
Just two really quick things. One, the 2 positions that we're trying to fill, preferably with the lieutenants, have been open now for a long time.
Yep.
We're running with just 2 on rotation, so it's hard to fill that. And as he said, it's not only the daytime where the per diems have to cover it, it's the nighttime where the call people have to step in, because it's still a stipend. So it's the type of people that are willing to do it for the small stipend that need to cover it. Secondly, I'm really happy that you're all considering this and you are hearing us out, because we really have huge shoes to fill. He's not gonna say it himself, but we used to have a deputy, and he was the deputy. He was doing everything on the floor, training everybody, running the show. He does not have a deputy. ever since he became a chief. We have one fire captain that's a call member that is not super active because he also has a full-time employment. So he's a chief, he's a deputy, he's a captain. He doesn't really have lieutenants. He has one call lieutenant. He responds to, I would say, about quarter, third, maybe more call. I really don't know. I should have done the statistics. He's on the engine, he's on the ambulance, he's doing that guidance that he's talking about. And on call 24/7, listening to the pager coming out at 11 p.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m., whenever, unless he has a solid crew that he's like, all right, they'll handle it. But even then, he'll come and just look at it. And then we haven't done it recently, but when we started this process, he was on rotation when we were short for the full-timers, just so you guys know.
Getting too old for that.
Yeah, so
Correct.
what we've been doing, the reason we probably, it sounds like we're asking for a lot, is because we understand the pressures, and we've been trying to do a lot with a little. And it's been getting strained and strained and strained, and it's like no longer really sustainable. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think at this point, we have to kick this back to the select board.
Yeah, so I've
This
heard
is-
from a couple people. Is there anybody on the BudCom who hasn't spoken, who feels strongly yes or no on these suggestions, so that we can take that into consideration when we vote tomorrow?
I would also feel strongly yes for kind of the same reasons that I feel like everyone said, but it becomes a safety issue. And, you know, as I think you were saying, like, it gets worse and worse with time. And so there's going to be a point where, like, we're kind of
It sounds like we're
clawing
at that
back.
point.
Yes, exactly. It does sound like we're at that point. So I would be a strong yes.
Okay.
As well.
Okay. Brian or Michelle or?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna say just one more thing. I think taking advantage of the sense of duty that people have for this town for such a long time is not nice of the town.
Okay, Jen, it's all yours. So that
Did you
brings.
guys want to speak?
I'm supportive.
Okay. Michelle?
I would be supportive also. I'm just curious how easily, maybe that's not the right word, you would fill, if you have 2 full-time positions open now, how likely it is for you to fill them if they are lieutenants or however you're gonna do that.
I go back to the board that everybody else is on, and like I explained to you, I will get the young kid that has 0 experience to come in here, do his year, 6 months, whatever, and move on to somewhere else.
Is
And
that-
I will continue to have that revolving door, at least on that end of it, from now until there's some changes made. And I'm hoping that this is the step in the right direction. I'd love to have a crystal ball and tell you it's gonna solve everything. It's not. We're all sitting in that same boat. I can tell you right now that there are 2 or 3 departments that have got full-time openings that are literally recruiting from each other, tapping somebody on the shoulder, how about coming over this way? I've had people move from Dover to Newington because Newington's paying better, and the guys are doing exactly what I'm telling you that I'd like to do now. They've done their time in Dover, they're tired of riding a bus every night, and they know they can go out and catch up and do another couple of years and coast through it a little bit.
I think I'm hearing, Chief, though, that the difference would be that when you have some of those newer guys, that if they had a deputy on the floor or a lieutenant, they'd have a different support structure than we
Exactly.
have now. That would, I think
Exactly.
that might make it a little bit easier to retain.
Well, and those newer guys aren't gonna be put into lieutenant positions, so
Right.
that's not pertinent. The other comment that I would make is, I think it was either 2 or 3 people said that by assuming this increase, there would be strong effort to reduce other costs. to offset that, and I just hope that would actually happen and encourage that to happen as well.
I'm one of 5. I was mostly just speaking for myself.
But
I
also,
think, I mean, one of our other biggest budgets is police. And I think we have done a lot to grow the police department over the past 3 to 5 years. And I think there may be some wiggle room there as we talk with them about, maybe looking at being a little more cautious with their budget as we turn our attention to the other safety department in town that needs maybe a little bit more attention. So I know we haven't done the police budget yet, but I think our hope was that maybe we could talk with our police force a little bit about trying to be more circumspect in their budget because of the necessity for this safety intervention, because the police has come a long way. And that I think that would be maybe one of the most obvious departments for us to talk with. Letty, would you agree with that? Yeah.
Okay.
So just to clarify, I'm sorry, but with the lieutenant positions, and there's been a lot of discussion, but just, so you're looking to actually promote, right?
Or transition to.
Or transition?
Transition to. I don't
Okay.
really, to be honest with you right now, I haven't got anybody within the department. I shouldn't say that. I do have a guy that's on in a different department with one of my per diems that's coming back. Actually, 2 of them are, that may be interested in taking these positions. Both, the one has been with me probably the last 3 years as a per diem. The other one had started out with this department, lives in the area, was out with me at 11 o'clock this last night, and that would be a big asset to you. I would try to get them as close as possible to here and encourage them to come back. I'm not guaranteeing that either, but it would definitely give you some stability as far as that 24-hour shift that they are here, that you would have somebody that I can trust and know they can make the right calls to cover something.
Okay, so
So-
Chief is,
I'm sorry, just to make sure that I understood. So to be clear.
quickly,
Yes. So then to Michelle's question, there are more chances that Chief would be able to get those 2 lieutenant positions than the 2 open positions that have been open for such a long time. Because she was asking that it's been open such a long time, what are the chances of you feeling? So because it's going to be 2 lieutenant positions and you have people in mind, then it would be faster for you
It
to
would
fill that.
definitely be
Okay.
faster because I do, like I said, I'm not guaranteeing they're both interested. They're both looking very hard at it. I would encourage them in any way I can possibly do that. But it would make those a lot easier than trying to fill with 2 young kids.
Yep.
so Chief is going to meet with the Select Board tomorrow night.
Tomorrow, and I think this has been very helpful for
They're
me.
going to come to an agreement tomorrow night, and then the chief is going to come back with that agreement
With the
to us
formalized
a
budget.
week from tonight.
Correct.
A week from tonight. Okay, very
Thank you,
good.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time,
Chief.
guys.
Okay,
And thank you,
Brian.
Katerina, for your comments.
Brian is our school rep.
I can be quick. So first item, solar panels. I do not have that spreadsheet yet. I will follow up with Molly O'Keefe to get that. Hopefully I'll have that for next week. But project started. If you've driven by the school, you can see that they have the safety railings up for the workers. So they're done the roof prep. And again, still as of the school board meeting on November 4th, still on target to complete by the end of the calendar year. Next item, SAU budget proposal. Not sure if you mean the school administrative unit or the co-op. I can talk to both.
I like them both as soon as they're available.
Okay. So the SAU budget was approved at the last SAU meeting. That budget is $3,425,176. It is a 4.49% increase. It could also be 4.41. I can't read my notes. I apologize. Over last year's budget, based on changes in valuations in other town, the line item in Brentwood will actually be lower than it was last year. As far as the co-op, there is no number yet that I have. The co-op board will have a public hearing on the budget on January 16th at 6 p.m. There'll be a deliberative session, on February 5th. on the budget. And that's where that stands for the co-op budget.
February 5th,
Correct.
okay.
And then on the Swayze budget, December 16th works for the presentation to this board.
Very good.
We had our first presentation on the budget at our meeting earlier this month. The proposed budget is $7,453,987. That represents a 5.3% increase from the current budget. That does include the solar bond, however. If you pull out the solar bond, it's a 3.91% increase. And we're going to take another look at that at our meeting at the beginning of December and come back to you with a presentation on the 16th.
Could you repeat the 3 point?
So it's, if you take the solar project out of that increase, so it's a 5.3% increase. Without the solar, it's a 3.91% increase. That's all I have.
And the state education department mentioned something about,
So the state is going to decrease special ed payments to districts. Haven't had that discussion yet at the school board level to find out how that's going to affect us.
but that's expected to affect 2025?
Most likely, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
how.
Okay,
And that's, whether we increase funding for our special ed reserve fund or things like that, we'll be looking at how we can address that.
okay, okay. Thank you. Did we lose Kip? Okay. Then you get your wish. You can be first.
Where would you like to start?
What would you like us to know about,
I have 4 budgets for you to look at.
okay? You can start wherever you want, just tell us which one you're,
We can start with town clerk. The increases in my budget are for hours. To make a long story short, this past year, I had my deputy and my assistant clerk switch positions. My assistant clerk now, she only works 16 hours in our office. Historically, that person would have been 32 hours. We are drowning. We are very busy. So it's basically 2 of us there the whole time. I cannot lose my Joyce. She's my 16-hour person. But Heather and I would like to go full-time to 40 hours. That is actually only a 13-hour increase instead of a 16-hour increase, losing that one person. But that does enable Heather to retirement. So that is a pretty big increase, obviously, in the budget. And although my budget's small, I mean, an increase, even, 1% is big, and I realize that. So nothing else in the budget has changed. Everything else is staying the same.
So are there no increases in wages? It's just hours that's
There are
increasing?
increases in wages for myself and the deputy, but the assistant clerk is not getting a wage increase because she was already higher. We didn't take money away from her when she switched positions.
What are the increases?
They are 5%, 3 and 2.
you mentioned you're drowning, what particularly, what what is,
We are very
Making it-
busy. And if we don't want to have one person in the office at a time. We are the only office that's open 5 days a week. It's very busy. So with taxes, and it's tax season right now, we just went through elections. The increase in the number of homes we have now, it's a lot. And you would think, people not having a lot of money, there's a lot of cars being bought. A lot. So
Somebody has money.
there's a lot of people that have money, yes. So it is a lot.
And just to clarify, it was helpful for the select board when we talked about this, that historically, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 years ago, that the position that Joyce now holds, that's a 16-hour position, used to be a 32-hour position. So that had been, those hours had been cut back, I think, just before the COVID pandemic.
Just before, yeah.
And so by Daphne going from 35 to 40 hours and Heather going 32 to 40, that's the 13-hour bump that she's referring to. That actually doesn't even get all the way back into hours to where they were 5 years ago, where they had another 32-hour person. So while it does seem like kind of a jump that's happening this particular year, it actually, if you look at it historically, is still a lower number of total paid hours than we had on the books previously, because we had had another 32-hour person. Am I saying that correctly? Okay. That helped us understand how this falls into sort of like a multi-year pattern of us having cut back on hours and now going back up a little bit out of necessity. So that was helpful for us.
how many total hours are we going from and to? For all three of you, actually, do you have an idea?
So Joyce is 16,
Staying the same.
staying the same. I am 35, going to 40. And Heather is 32, going to 40. So it's only 13-hour increase.
83 to 96. Daphne, do you feel like there is still enough work to, in some future scenario, need more hours, like a 32-hour Joyce versus a 16? Like, is that the goal? Would that be like a goal of yours? I'm just
Maybe
curious.
someday.
Okay.
Yes, that would be really nice.
Okay.
That way I could step away from some of the
Mm.
waiting on customer stuff to finish the other stuff that I have in the back.
Mm.
But yes, I mean, we're coming in earlier, we're staying later. It's been a lot this year, for sure.
I can imagine.
And we did have the maximum number of elections possible. So the maximum
We
number of
certainly did.
absentee ballots, I think this year probably kind of brought it to a head.
Yes,
Yeah.
this definitely brought it to a head.
Other questions, comments from the committee? Is there,
I 100% support you.
Yeah, just say.
I 100% support having you guys go full-time, and I appreciate that. But I said earlier this season that I couldn't support raises over a certain amount, and that is the only reason I'm going to vote against this. But I appreciate you guys going full-time, and it's, you know, that I support you and love you.
I know.
Okay.
Thanks for your help with the election.
Anytime.
not yet.
Also, it's worth noting that the way Daphne's budgets work, these same changes apply to the other part of her budget. So I don't know if
For
it
the
might,
tax, it's exactly
right.
the same. as the
because
tax.
her employees are split into chunks. So you'll see part of it in this budget and part of it in the tax.
But I have good news about the election ones.
Yeah, that's true. But they are separate budgets that probably need separate votes. We did vote on them all separately at the select board.
Is there a motion?
Can I say one more? Can I ask one more thing?
Yep.
Sorry. I'm curious, or I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is like a trickle down and a part of a larger conversation of how we also as a town get all of our information, and you being backlogged and having to make up and having to just have a lot on your plate. You're doing the best that you can, but I do feel like, we're asking for more and more transparency, and yet we have like minimum, even below minimum staffing that we've approved over the years. So I just wanted to point out that it feels like, I hope that we would support you in supporting our town. So thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Any public comment?
Jim Hazard, 33 Mohawk Lane. I just want to say, respect our clerk, appreciate all she does. I think she runs an extremely effective, efficient organization. Heather, Joyce, her, I can't say enough good things about them. I also will say that this past election, I know friends who live in Hampton. I know friends who live in Atkinson. It was a disaster. They waited over an hour. It was a mess. I was in and out, and I went at 9 a.m. So anyways, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Joyce left. So again, you run an extremely efficient, effective organization, and I so much would support if you say you need this. I absolutely believe you, and I would give it to you. So thank you.
We have a second and a motion for $94,039. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you vote?
Nope.
You going to vote?
If you say
Not
any
as an
opposed,
aye.
then she'll vote.
Not as an aye.
Say any opposed, and then she'll vote.
Then no.
I need your
Nay.
vote so I can vote.
I say nay.
She's a no.
Okay, I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, and then it's the same for tax collector. The items are just different there's no other changes in the budget.
I move the budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for $95,138. Is there any discussion? Public comment? No public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
So now we can move on to town meeting. Town meeting is almost a 30% decrease because we're going from 5 elections to 1.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for $2,801.
I'm sorry, could I just say one more thing before you vote?
You're not going to
This
increase
is
it, are you?
technically 2 elections because they consider town meeting an election.
Right.
So technically it's 2. I don't want to, it's still a 30% decrease.
Okay.
Just so we're clear.
Public comment? There being no public comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I said aye.
And I'm an aye.
Okay.
And then the regular election budget, this one is, the difference in this, it is a 46.85% decrease. It is going again down to, for most of the things, down to 1 election. The supervisors get 2 elections because they do town meeting. And we have added a police detail line in this particular budget to ensure that we have 2 police officers at every election.
And just to clarify, Letty and I will need to go into BMSI and add that. Sorry, we just haven't done that yet since we approved this budget. It doesn't change the amount. So where you see the 110 line at 2,000, that line will drop to 500, and there'll be an additional line of 1,500 for police detail. So it's just splitting out that line into an additional line. The bottom line does not change based on that.
Is
Thank you
the
for that.
account, is there a new account created under?
We'll add a new line. I mean, it would be okay to leave it like it is. It's just cleaner and more clear what the money is actually going for if you put it as a police detail line.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second for $9,301. Public comment? Thank you for being brief in the public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne.
Thanks, Daphne.
Appreciate it.
Have a
Sorry,
good night.
apologies for the delay.
At least have a drink cart.
You've asked for that a few times, a few
It's not
times.
the first year you've
That
asked for
has come up. A few times that's come up.
Fit it in your budget. Okay. Let's do, again,
Do you want to do debt service?
Yeah.
not yet.
Okay.
Dexter is here, and he's been here for a long time, and I wanted to deal with him a long time ago. But Doug has some comments about our visit to the Grange, and if we could entertain those at this moment. You want to take a microphone?
Dexter Swayze, 42 Old Gordon Road. I'm president of the Brentwood Historical Society, which is situated in the Grange Building, which is a town-owned building. There we go. Now, do you want me to answer questions or what?
Doug, you can use this mic here.
Doug Finnant-Govert. When we did the site walk, thank you very much, appreciate that. A couple of things came to mind, and I wasn't quite sure which way to approach it, but I did talk to Jack a couple of times during the week. I didn't know if it wouldn't be advantageous first, because the major request of having a septic and well being installed over the town building, whether or not it would be advantageous for us to have a structural engineer come in first and take a look at the building because of the age of the building. Walking through the basement, I'm not an engineer by any sense of the imagination, but the bowing in the foundation and the damage to the joist all the way across seems to be, well, it was a concern for me. And not knowing exactly what that would entail, if it needed to be shored up at all, or how much that would cost with the foundation and the reinforcement of the structure, the joist beams, it could be very significant to a point that if we invest or make the move to put a septic system in, well, it may not be the right thing to do. I did speak to Kip during the week, and unfortunately he's not here, just to get an idea. Jen had made mention that we'd bring him back over to the building and take a look, and which isn't a bad idea. But he did mention to me there's limited knowledge as to what he knows, and he couldn't give a full assessment of the building itself. And Jen also mentioned about there is a cost involved with having, I did take the initiative, or I took the liberty to call Emmanuel Engineering to get some idea of what the cost would be. And it can range in price to $200 to about $1,500. The average price being about $900 for a good assessment on the building. It's not Kip's expertise. I don't know how severe everybody else felt when they did the walkthrough. But I do think it might be a good thing to entertain prior to looking at that type of expense.
Good.
Dexter, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not a town employee, I'm just an advocate for the Historical Society, I mean, for the Grange building, and just have to identify some of the issues. And I've brought up 3 in the capital improvement plan, and those 3 were a well, a septic. That building has no water. There's no water there. And there's a incinerating toilet there. That's all we have for the public that goes there. So hygiene's an issue. I rely on the fire department. I have to bring a barrel over in the summertime for just watering the window boxes that we put out front. So it requires the fire department to come over to fill it several times and stuff. The structural thing is, I mean, that's beyond me. It's just something that I've identified. I've asked for it to be looked at from a pest standpoint too, as to what that problem is, but it hasn't happened yet. They're ongoing. The building's almost 175 years old, so I think you got your money out of it so far. So the fact that we're all going to probably need a new hip at some point too. So but I just look at it from the compliance standpoint. And then there's another new issue, but I think this has been taken care of, and that is the security system over there. Jen may want to reply to this, but the security system is defunct. As I speak now, there is no fire or security over at the over at the Grange building. That's a major compliance issue.
As you have mentioned, it is a town-owned building. And I think it's important from a town standpoint, from a safety standpoint, for the people that are, if we're allowing the public in and out of it, security of it for sure, and stability of the building. I mean, you gave us an excellent tour. We saw the basement, we saw the attic, and there were obvious concerns that you expressed and concerns that we could see. I really would like to see a thorough engineering report in writing of what we would need to do to essentially bring the building up to code so that it will be here another 40, 80 years.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I think it's about time.
And no small part of that is when you go through the building and see what the Historical Society has done on the first and second floor. There's been a lot of care there, and that might really be the only reason we're paying attention to that building. So, if we're going to get that's not within our purview here, but it is in the Select Board's purview, and if we can make if this committee can make a suggestion to the Select Board.
Yeah, the Select Board's already handling the security issue. That's a work in progress.
Security is one thing, but the engineering study is another.
Yeah, the historicals, that you're welcome to come talk to the Select Board about it, 100%. Because we have a government buildings fund that we can talk about using. for what, you know, if you can come to us with what you need.
So I think as long as again, I'm not a town employee, I'm just an advocate for the building, because I'm there so often. But just to know what the protocol is, like, oh, didn't do it, so it's not happening. So I need to come to the select board and request.
If you're looking for an expenditure from town funds to do some sort of upkeep on the building, that would not involve the budget committee. That would go straight to the select board.
Okay.
Because you don't have your own budget. So this would be like if you had your own budget, you know, setting it. So if there's, and obviously working with Kip, who is a town employee, and if he doesn't feel comfortable with a really old building, 175-year-old building, then finding the people that we need, whether it's hiring somebody to do an assessment, as Doug has suggested, those are things that the select board could consider funding out of our government building capital reserve fund or other funds. So we just need you to come make a request.
Okay.
Thank you, Dexter.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yep. And thanks for touring it. And we probably should be on, if I hadn't said something, then that tour would not have happened. It's a town building, and that's what brought it here today, and that's what's, now things
Sure.
are starting to roll. But
It's probably actually in future years would be almost more beneficial to have the select board do a tour
That'd-
rather than BudCom, because that's really the decision makers for your building without you having your own standalone budget. Just for,
Right.
like, I kind of just thought of that as you were talking, like that would make sense. It was helpful because there were some people there who were on, you know, like myself was there. And
Yeah.
I reported back to the select board, but probably maybe next year it would be actually helpful to have the select board
Okay.
interface with you directly.
Well, I see it got generated from the capital improvement plan.
Sure.
And I saw that other departments had tours, but
Yep.
we had not.
Right.
So that's what.
Right.
got-
Yeah, I think the tour was a great idea. It just probably, you need maybe a slightly different audience next time.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Jen, I think we're going to depend upon you for the rest of the budgets here, maybe starting with the debt service.
Sure. And debt service, just, sorry, I didn't make my red line changes to this one. There's just two changes to be aware of for the budget that was actually approved by Select Board. One is under the fire station bond, which is the fourth one down in your first section. Every year, we use 25,000 of impact fees to pay down that bond amount from 75 to 50. So where you see there next year requested 75,000, that should be dropped to 50. That's what the select board approved. And then the only other change was under the last section, the 980 line for TAN, that needs to be at $1. So with that reduction of 25,000 up at the top, the addition of a $1, the bottom line number that you have here of 308,390.58 is actually 283,392. That is the number that was approved by Select Board, and we will make those changes in BMSI. We just have not done that yet. And other than that, these are just the standard debt service numbers. They are up because of the open space bond that had been passed by the public a few years back. And we do have a property that we're moving forward with, and potentially even another, I think some others may be in the works. So those are the differences that you see here for the line items that have gone up are the open space bond principal and the open space bond interest. Those are the increases that you see here because those are new bonds.
That's the 250K.
Yes. Yep. And I think when it was put in, I can't say for sure because Karen did this initial budget. I think it was the initial one, and I think she maybe even, I'm just looking at the numbers here. When you look at 80,000, I don't know, do you remember, Letty, if this was just the one bond that we knew of, or if there was like a factor in here for a potential second bond? It was for the one that we knew about that we've already signed off on. Okay.
So we had some open space bond principles before that 250K, right?
Correct.
So the 250 was added to what?
This reflects,
what the
yeah, I think
residual.
the 37% increase and then the almost 200% increase in the interest accounts for that. Is my understanding, having not been the one that made this budget myself.
So there's a reduction in the interest on the fire station, Lyford.
It's the principal actually that is being reduced. So the 985 line for the principal.
Yeah, but in the second section.
Oh, here. I
Well-
think those are just the bonds maturing, that some of those interest rates, the interest payments are dropping. So when you look at the bottom line number, it is an increase, but it's not the increase that you see on there. If we do that, the new total of 283,392 minus last year's of 240081, it's an increase of 43,000, 240081, which is about an 18% increase, not the 28% that you see on the paper here because of the impact fee use.
What's the percentage?
18%. And that's almost exclusive, that is exclusively due to the new bonds.
Could you just come back to us and confirm that the reduction in interest is due to principal that we're paying off?
I can try. Like I said, this budget was prepared in October by Karen before she went out on leave.
Is there anybody else who could help, like our auditors? They usually look at debt service. They should have amortization schedules.
I'm assuming that's where these numbers came from, but we could try to confirm with them if the board has questions about the accuracy of these numbers.
That would be good to have, I guess, considering that the person who prepared.
Is there a concern? Are people surprised to see? I'm trying to interpret what the real question is. Are people concerned that these decreases are not expected or not actual? What's the actual?
Just looking at the funding, so like we're adding, so the principal, right, stays the same for the last two, for example, but the interest drops, which, I mean, could be, depends how the bond was structured.
Right.
But it could also be that it matures, so.
No, that's typical for how historically, the town has done their bonds with level principal payment. And so the total payment drops over time because the interest is just calculated off of.
Okay. So it's the
Yeah, I think
structure of
it's
the
the
bond?
standard.
Okay.
I think it's just the standard way we do our bonds. in
Okay.
Brentwood.
So it's the reduced principal.
Yeah, and I have no reason to think that these numbers are not accurate.
No, and I'm not, it's.
No,
just-
no, I hear you. I was just trying to clarify what the question.
Jack's point, and just to understand whether it's maturing or is that's the way it was structured. So if that's the way it was
think
structured.
actually
it
I
makes
could
sense.
look at
Bondholders
this.
like to get paid, that's,
Well, of course. I mean, if only interest was optional, that would be great. So like when I look at
But then wouldn't the
last year
principal
finals,
Principal wouldn't. Like you pay the same amount.
I'm just gonna
Still, so
compare.
interest goes down, but your principal's up. So your payment then is not fixed.
No, the payment is not fixed, the payment goes down. So basically, they take the principal divided by the term. That's your principal payment. And then they calculate the insurance
Okay.
as
So
they
it's
go,
not a
or
fixed
sorry.
on the balance too.
Yeah, on the
So last year, I'm just looking at some of these interests. Looks like kind of a similar pattern over time that these have, the interest has gone down.
Just trying to look at last year's debt service interest lines did not go down. I would expect.
So like, I guess they, what I show in front of me is that they did go down. Like the Lyford interest went from 4,400 to 3,391, and now it's going down to 3,275, progressively going down. So I have no reason to think that these aren't correct, but if people want me to try to confirm that, I can do my best to. But like I said, these are fixed numbers that are on our bond schedule. So I don't believe that any of these would have changed over time since we initiated the bond.
Is there a motion?
And it's for the 283392.
Second.
Any public comment? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'm an aye.
Okay. So next we have town admin and finance.
Want to do finance first?
Sure.
Who's the bookkeeper clerk? Who is that?
That is, so the first line item, the 110, is our current treasurer, Joyce, who's going to retire in 1 week.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, not the end of the year?
No,
Oh my.
no, she's going on to greener pastures. So that's that first line. The second line is the assistant to the town administrator. So that's Jillian's position.
Ah.
And it's also, there is an extra buffer in there. I don't know if you folks remember, maybe a couple of years ago, that we went down by a position in the assessor and finance office, and we were outsourcing some of our reconciliation. So that's Jillian's salary plus that outsourcing in that line. I think that the select board agrees that once we figure out how we're moving forward with a town administrator, that we probably need to kind of, at some point, we've been asking over the past year to kind of at some point have a discussion about how best to stabilize between the treasurer's office, the assessing office, the assistant, the outsourcing, how to really do that best in the most efficient fashion. Because I think there was some thought that during COVID, some of the outsourcing worked, and maybe now that we're coming out of the worst of COVID, maybe that outsourcing was not working as well. And so I think that this is a budget that may change a little bit over time, but with our town administrator being out and our treasurer about to retire, that we felt it was safest probably to keep this budget relatively stable and then look to the future of how we might do a little bit of reorganization. That also overlaps with the concept of needing to update our financial software, and that may actually take some of the burden off of some of these people by modernizing our software, and we might find that we are good with who we have. So I think there's some moving parts there, and we didn't want to really change this budget significantly, knowing that there are those moving parts. And so you really do not see any significant changes in this budget other than that our audit expense goes up, and that's just a standard expense that we pay to our auditors. So that has an increase for this year, and then there's some small personnel increases. But other than that, this budget, the biggest increase is just the standard audit increase in here.
And is that a contract that we have with them, or that's a year-to-year contract?
You know, I actually don't know if we have a multi-year or single-year agreement with them. I'm not positive. Do you know, Letty? Yeah. Plosnick and, yes, those folks. Yeah, so I'm not sure, but that was the, like I said, year to year. So that's the projected cost for the following, for the audit. 19,875 for next year and 16,125 for last year. What do you see there?
Higher or lower?
Would that have changed since this draft budget was made in October? Okay. That's why for some of these budgets that we didn't make, we felt the most comfortable not changing them significantly. And as we talked about earlier, if we underspend a budget, that money has the ability to go back to taxpayers. And so we don't want to make any drastic changes unless we really feel confident in those changes, because we did not make these budgets.
Can you describe the treasurer's job? How many hours a week?
The treasurer is a very part-time position. It's approximately 1 day a week, sometimes a little bit more during like audit season or certain times of the year. And the deputy treasurer is folded into that salary. So if the treasurer is not available and the deputy comes in and does the work of the treasurer instead, the deputy gets paid out of that same line item. So that line actually encompasses the treasurer and who is part-time, and then a very part-time deputy treasurer. We are lucky enough that we do have a current deputy treasurer who hadn't really been very active, but is going to step up and help us in the transition after Joyce retires. And then we are looking and have posted to look for a long-term treasurer replacement. But to answer your question, it's about a 1 day a week position at this point.
So Jillian will become the treasurer then, is that?
No, so Jillian is the assistant to the assessing office, and that's in that other line item. So that first line item is just Joyce and her deputy, and after she retires, Ambrose Kizza is the deputy. He will be serving as sort of acting treasurer until we get some clarity on long-term who's going to fill those roles for us. And so that will be in that first line item, and then the second line is where Jillian's salary lives. She is having a 4% wage increase this year. And also in there is that buffer that's approximately $20,000 that was being used to outsource some of our reconciliation. So it's 2 people in that second line.
And how far away from the new software are we?
I think it depends. I think that BMSI was acquired, purchased, rolled into a company called GWorks. They are one potential option that we could switch to. My gut feeling is that it would be a little bit quicker if we did that because it's with someone that we have already a relationship with. If we go with another product, it might take a little bit longer. Ambrose is very excited about trying to help us switch over, and our auditors had said that they would help us. Jillian's excited to switch over. I think everybody has known for years that this was a switch that really needed to happen. And we are excited to finally pull the trigger and make that happen in the near future. And so I don't know exactly, I can tell you when this will happen, but I think we all would like it to be complete by next year's budget season so that we can use the new software this time next year.
And the new software has a line item for?
Different companies offer different things. So like some companies offer treasurer software, assessing software, election software, all the different like modules that you can buy that all talk to each other. Some do only certain modules. Some towns pick which modules they want to use. I think we're looking to get a system where all parts of the town offices communicate optimally with each other. And Ambrose had felt that some of the work that the treasurer is doing right now and the work that the assessing office is doing right now is made significantly more difficult by the way that we are doing it, and that if we updated our software, both of those people's work would probably get easier, and Jillian's too, from a payroll perspective. So multiple people's jobs may get easier, and once we have a sense of that, then I think, as I said earlier, we'll have a good sense of, do we have the right number of person hours with the new software? Because, the idea of software is to make less person hours of work. So we're very hopeful that that will happen.
So there'll be a line item in it for projected revenue and.
I'm hoping we would be able to get much sexier reports than we have now in terms of projected, all kinds of projected. I don't know, Letty, if you can speak to that, but I think that what we have heard about this software is that it can do 2020 type of things instead of 1980 type of things. So we are very excited. And things like payroll could be electronic. A lot of the stuff that we do on paper and in Excel spreadsheets right now could be done through the software. And so we are very excited about moving forward with it.
It's getting late, and I'm expressing wishful thinking.
And the voters have already contributed the capital reserves to do this work. So we don't need to go to the voters to ask for money for any of this. We just have to make it happen.
Great.
Nope, not yet.
Just curious with the increases in the salary lines, so the treasurers, we won't have one for a little while, but realizing that's also the deputy, I'm just curious
Sure,
about the
this
increases, I guess.
this budget was made before we knew the treasurer was retiring. And presumably, actually, we will have, so the deputy will be serving as the treasurer and will be getting paid as the treasurer once they are doing the full work of the treasurer. And so we decided just to leave that line item as is because the town legally can't not have a treasurer. We have to, because they are the only people who are allowed to move money and sign the checks. So we don't anticipate a significant gap. For the second line, the increase, I'm assuming, is Jillian's increase and maybe a small increase built in there for increased costs of outsourcing. Like I said, I didn't make this budget, so I'm not sure, but I think that's why you see small increases in those first two lines. The treasurer, because of being part-time, is not eligible for benefits. So the benefit changes that you see are for the full-time assistant position.
But we don't know what that amount actually is.
The amount
increase.
for her increase is 4%.
That's just one person.
Jillian.
That's just
For
Jillian.
Jillian,
Okay.
yes, correct. Yeah, it's a 3% COLA and a 1% merit.
Further questions, comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
There's a motion and second for $122,745 for finance. Is there any public comment? No public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you.
Town administrator?
So the last one we have in here is the town administrator.
It's you and Letty, right?
It's the select board. Well, our town administrator is on leave, so has been being paid
Ah,
on leave. And so this essentially reflects the town administrator's salary, and then FICA Medicare that flows down from that. The professional training is level funded. Everything else, dues goes up slightly from 110 to 150. Books and publications as a placeholder at $1. So this budget goes up relatively minimally, mostly just based on wage adjustments and the flow from retirement and Medicare, et cetera. Once we know what the future holds for our town administrator position, this budget may change. So we, once again, decided that leaving it kind of as it was prepared in draft form probably made the most sense, given that there may be some moving parts here, but they're really just personnel changes. And for now, it made the most sense to leave the personnel kind of as is, as it was done in draft form about 6 weeks ago when this draft budget first came out.
Given the situation and probability of this budget being reopened, should we just postpone it because it's relatively simple?
We certainly could, if that's what BudCom wants to do.
And perhaps, towards the end of the budget season, more information would be available as to regards of how that situation might remedy.
I think you could do that. Alternatively, I think you could, this is essentially, level funded with a small personnel increase. You could pass it on the assumption that no matter what happens with our town administrator position, this would probably cover us. But I think either one would be reasonable, and I would defer that to BudCom.
I think we should defer it.
I didn't hear
I
that.
think we should defer voting on it so we know what we're actually voting for.
Other comments? Is there a motion to defer?
That sounded like a motion that Michelle made.
Motion to table, I guess, is what.
Table, yeah.
Second.
Public comment is pretty quiet, so all in favor of tabling, town administrator?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to vote nay, because I would be comfortable passing it, and the select board already did pass it.
And I'm an aye.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Next one.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, and I think that was all that I had for you. Are we going to defer Kip until he can be available,
I think we,
since he's not here?
well,
I think that would.
do you want to talk about it, or, do you feel? to
I
talk?
mean, I've spoken to Kip about it. There's some small changes in here. And if folks want me to attempt to do it, I'm not sure how fair that is to Kip for me to present his budget. There are some increases in here. The budget in total only goes up 4.72%. And it's mostly standard COLA and wage adjustments. There's also a 4% wage adjustment here. For the BudCom's perspective, what the select board elected to do for department heads and for Lieutenant Doty, people who normally would have been evaluated by our professional staff that is on leave, the select board decided to do across the board 4% adjustments for those people, just kind of pick a middle of the road value rather than do an official process, just for fairness and transparency. So this will, this budget may need to be adjusted just slightly for that 4% increase. But overall, this budget was fairly level funded. There were some increases for plumbing inspections with an anticipation that that will be a busier service this year. There was some small increases for professional training of $100 and for books and publications, a small increase because every few years Kip has to buy a whole new set of books. And he's going to use some of this year's money for that and need some for next year. So if the BudCom wants to defer this, same as the last budget, I think you could defer, but you'll see that this budget does not have major differences from year prior.
If we can agree to pass it, I'd be inclined to do that because we have a very busy schedule between now and the end of the year. Our meetings are packed and we don't have actually room to expand. If we can come to an agreement, if not, we can table it.
I think the difference between this and the previous is that a previous can change drastically depending on the outcome of the situation, whereas this one has been prepared by the head of the department.
Right, correct.
So.
Oh, and one other thing, sorry, that I didn't mention, the travel and mileage was inadvertently, well, not inadvertently, but it was zeroed out, and Kip did want to put $1 back in that. So the amount that was approved by select board was 92471. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. That was one difference that Kip wanted us to add back in. So that's what the number that was approved by select board.
That $1 changes everything.
Well, I just want it to be the same number that we agreed upon, or else the BudCom and the select board budgets don't match.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and second for $92,471 for code enforcement. Public comment is, they're somewhat awake over there, but so we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then I'm an aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen.
And thank you for your patience as the select board attempts to do the best with these budgets. We got extremely lucky that we had some draft budgets to work off of, or else we would have been in a bigger world of hurt. So that was lucky this year.
Well, you've got your hands full, we know that. I'm just going to comment on, we're trying to publicize, for obvious reasons. You could see how much misunderstanding there is about the budget here tonight. But the budget hearing is being publicized. Steph
Lewandon. Mhm.
is working on that. She's going to put something into the next BNL in December, and then in January a larger something or other. Also, so that's progressing. This committee wanted to push it to try to improve attendance. And so that's what the progress is.
Can I just really quickly say something else? I know the board, the select board had at one point, and I think you had talked here about having something that gets sent either digitally or physically out to taxpayers.
Right, like a voter's guide.
Yeah, whatever, that is still in the works.
Yep, I think we're gonna talk about that tomorrow night during committee updates, yep.
I presume nothing has gone on to do with the municipal building in the last.
No, I don't think there's been a meeting, and I think that committee had basically decided that given some of the numbers that were coming back that did not seem to be realistic, that that committee, I think Letty Wright was most comfortable kind of taking a pause, not putting it in front of the voters this coming year, but instead maybe going to the voters to ask for support for formal engineering planning. So that's the current status of that committee.
So we're going to keep the engineers busy here then.
Potentially, yeah. And there already is a fund for that. I think it was potentially, there might be a warrant to ask to expand that fund slightly to cover a full engineering analysis that would be able to provide the voters with the difference between a combination building versus standalone building, add-on later building, et cetera, to give the public some options for choices for that building.
Very good. Thank you all for your patience. Our next meeting is November 25th. That's a week from tonight. It's here at 6 o'clock. Does everybody think they'll be here? Is that?
I think so.
Okay.
It's Thanksgiving week.
Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion. Second.
Okay.
Do we need a second? I don't know.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We need an all in favor for adjourning. Aye. At 8:59, I think there was a lot of ayes.
That ran much longer than I thought it would.